Yo, I'm Bob. I'm into Marvel, and I happen to be totally blind since birth, talking about X-Men the Animated Series episodes 11 and 12, Days of Future Past, parts 1 and 2. Part 1 premiered on March 13th in 1993, and Part 2 premiered on March 20th in 1993. When I received these three episodes, it was on my 11th birthday, so I would watch them alongside a big bucket of KFC and a mountain of birthday cake, and I had a heck of a time watching these episodes. I already knew who Bishop was because season 2 was airing in reruns on Saturday mornings. And like I said, I watched these all out of order. I don't know how in the world I was able to keep up with everything watching season 1 and 2 at the same time in no chronological order whatsoever. But I already knew who Bishop was. I wonder what those who were introduced to him in this two-parter, what they might have thought of him when he showed up on screen for the first time. He's a very apathetic character in this particular timeline. I don't know if his sister Shard was taken out in a rebel sortie or what, but Bishop has no compunction about turning a much older Wolverine and some unnamed mutants over to the Sentinels as the episode begins. He is out to make his tracker money. He needs to eat. This is a dystopian future in which you got to do what you got to do in order to survive. And besides, he feels like the Sentinels treat all the other mutants just fine as long as they fall in line, as long as they do what they're told. So, yeah, he's just going about his merry day and trying to make his money. I love that scene where Wolverine and the others they're passing the graves of the X-Men. I don't think I had anyone watching this episode along with me, but I do believe I figured out it was a cemetery by the somber chimes that we got to hear as they were passing it. Something they added to the music in the episode. So you glean what you can from context clues when there are no audio description tracks in these older shows. So once the Sentinels let Bishop know his recovery quota has been reached, he is in their sights. And now that the situation affects him, now that he is equal with everyone else, you better believe he's going to do something about it. So he's got to adapt very fast, and we get that really amazing fight scene toward the beginning of the episode. Forge, I already knew who he was because he was in Time Fugitives parts 1 and 2 in season 2. I'd already seen that two-parter. It had aired earlier that particular summer of 94. So I knew who he was. I wasn't lost there. Bishop's got to go back in time to stop an assassination. And I think this was the summer I'd seen Terminator 2 Judgment Day for the first time. So the music, I remember thinking it sounded like it was paying homage to Terminator 2 Judgment Day. When we hear a lot of the music taking place in the future, and when Bishop's showing the X-Men flashbacks later on, it does sound a bit like Judgment Day. So I liked that quite a lot. I like those musical beats when we got to hear them. When he gets to the 90s, he has this interesting bout of amnesia. He doesn't remember who he needs to assassinate. He knows it's someone on the X-Men team. I guess time travel, since it's his first time, maybe it has some kind of effect on short-term memory, so he doesn't remember what he needs to do there. The temporal transceiver's trying to tell him, target, take out, take out. And he's just kind of wandering around. I like where he hijacks that bus and drives it into the X Mansion. And in the meantime, you have Gambit and Rogue. They've gone to see Beast, who's still eagerly awaiting his day in court. And Rogue has brought him, I think it's You Can't Go Home Again by Thomas Wolfe, from what someone told me a few years ago. And Gambit, he has an aversion to being in prison. He's, I think, kind of squirrely. So he decides to head out of there. And I like how this is setting a few things up, not only for part 2 of this miniseries, but for Externally Yours in season 2. Gambit, I mean, he's usually okay, he's laid back, but here he's just a bit uncomfortable. He's a bit off. So he heads outside, and, Rogue is still spending a bit of time with Beast. Everyone, of course, thinks Bishop's crazy. They don't believe he's from the future until Xavier sees images via Cerebro. Then you've got that really fast-paced fight scene toward the end of the episode. I forgot to mention when Nimrod showed up earlier in the episode, before Bishop and Wolverine headed to Forge's place. I instantly wanted the action figure. I wouldn't get him for another year and a half, thereabouts, but I loved his theme music. Thought he was a really interesting Sentinel from the future. And of course you have the ending of the episode where it's revealed that Bishop has been sent back to take out Gambit. And I remember after part 1, I don't know why, but I was told that I needed to wait until the episode finished and let it rewind itself. I couldn't rewind it. It was, I don't know, it had something to do with the VCR tape possibly being eaten. So I had to wait an extra, I don't know how many minutes before I started part 2. So I was a bit antsy. I like how Gambit is not having any of this as part 2 begins. I mean, here he's coming back from visiting Beast, and here's someone he's never met accusing him of being a traitor, being an assassin. The X-Men are not on his side here. They believe Bishop's from the future. Gambit, being something of an outsider in the past, he's really hurt by this. So Rogue, the woman he cares deeply for, doesn't even believe him. And he just kind of storms out of there. I really enjoyed that particular scene. I love Chris Potter's portrayal of Gambit in these episodes. This is, I would say, the angriest we've seen him so far. You have the flashbacks, or the flash forwards, I should say, not flashbacks, because Xavier is looking into the future. We have Bishop talking about how the Sentinels, they don't stop with mutants. When he's talking about, Gambit bringing on the end of the world, the Sentinels continue their crusade against humans. Because as we find out in the final decision, Master Mold, he sees mutants as, humans as well. There's no difference to him. They are human. So, he's trying to round everybody up. So you've got that flashback going on there. Xavier's going to Washington for the hearing on mutant affairs. So we get to see the unpleasant Robert Kelly as all that commences. Wolverine's got to stay behind and babysit Bishop and Gambit. Nobody wants Gambit to go, and Gambit's hurt by that. I like seeing some of the mutants from Muir Island and Genosha in this episode, because we have something that looks quite a lot like the Brotherhood of Mutants in this episode. We got Mystique, we got Blob, Pyro, Avalanche. They're all going to Washington to make a diversion so Mystique can, of course, shapeshift into Gambit and blame the X-Men for the assassination. And that was an interesting fight scene. I like how Jubilee is asleep during this one particular part of the episode as they're in Washington, and you hear her mumbling, "Gambit, stop, no, it's not true." I wonder if she's having dreams of Genosha. As much as she cares for Gambit, I think she's having her doubts as well. And I like how Gambit, he manages to sneak out of the X-Mansion and jet off to Washington. The fight scene toward the end of the episode is what you expect. You have a lot of action going on. I like how they manage to shove Blob into the swimming pool and they freeze him. But of course he's okay because it's a kid's show. You find out that Mystique is behind the assassination attempt, but Gambit, of course, stops her. Bishop probably shouldn't have mentioned, hey, if you take off my temporal transceiver, I go right back through time. I think he mentions that twice in this two-parter, so everybody knows that if he gets out of line, they can just rip that thing off, and that's exactly what Rogue does. She's not having any of it. So they do stop the assassination, and I like Bishop falling forward into the future and going, no, as he just kind of disintegrates and goes out of there. And we get to see pretty much the same future. I found out years later, though, that Wolverine's adamantium skeleton is in a tank as Bishop is sucked forward into this new future. And not much has changed, as we find out in Time Fugitives Parts 1 and 2. There's something that has happened, something else that's happened that's made the future as bleak as ever. And I did enjoy learning that Mystique had shapeshifted into who Rogue calls Mama there toward the end of the episode. That was a really interesting revelation. I don't remember if I'd seen a Rogue's Tale. I think I had by the time I watched Days of Future Past Parts 1 and 2. But they were all out of order, and I did remember Rogue calling Mystique Mama in that future episode in Season 2. I liked that Apocalypse, even though he wasn't in this miniseries, Mystique lets us know that he had orchestrated the assassination attempt on Senator Kelly because he wanted to give humanity the future it deserves. So rather like Palpatine in Star Wars, we don't see Apocalypse in this two-parter, but he has been pulling the strings in the shadows, and Mystique is in a lot of trouble because she feels as if she's failed Apocalypse. And there's this heartbreaking scene where Rogue is wanting to know, hey, why did you try to make me a slave back on your island? And Mystique says, well, it seemed like it was the only way to get you back. And that is certainly one messed up family. I feel for Rogue. If anyone is in a family that attempts to love you conditionally, to care for you as long as you don't question anything, it's got to be tough. But even tougher for Rogue because she wouldn't have had a mind of her own, and we find that out for the first time here at the end of the episode. That this woman Mystique was Rogue's adopted mother for a time. Of course, the end of the episode where Kelly is captured by Magneto was pretty interesting. I love how it ended where Professor Xavier's like, my watch has stopped because it's been magnetized. And it was a really amazing cliffhanger to end with. Of course, I had the next VHS tape to go right to, but it must have been maddening to have watched this and then to have to wait a week in order to see the season finale, because we hadn't seen Magneto since Deadly Reunions. So it's about freaking time he returns to the show. I love this two-parter. I think the time travel stuff was written pretty well. I think I would have liked to have seen just a little bit of Apocalypse maybe in the future. But I mean, it's not necessary. I liked hearing about him. You don't necessarily have to see him in order to feel the impact that he has on these characters. Other than that, I think I give these two episodes a 10 out of 10. This video is long enough. Next time we're going to be talking about Final Decision as well as Till Death Do Us Part 1. A couple of fascinating episodes. Well, I think all these episodes are fascinating. I love this show. So till next time, true believers.